Manufacturers are the bedrock of many Minnesota communities, and that includes Winona. They create an immense economic opportunity through high wage, high skilled jobs, and offer stability for the present and into the future. Minnesota is so unique, and it has over 8,300 manufacturers making a wide range of products, and this sector is growing in Minnesota. It represents the single largest private sector component of Minnesota's gross domestic product. 319,000 Minnesotans work in manufacturing, accounting for 13% of private sector jobs in the state. With the immense entrepreneurial mentality in Minnesota, it comes as no surprise that 42% of Minnesota's Fortune 500 companies are in manufacturing, with 17 of them being headquartered here in our state. It's important to note that Winona and the surrounding area boast some of the most unique and robust manufacturing in our state. Winona proper has almost 80 manufacturers and a robust over 100 in our county. We proudly represent manufacturing ranging from some of the most intricate and beautiful stained glass to industrial and composite manufacturing to incredible benches, lighting, rail safety equipment, medical technology, vanilla, and so much more. Before I highlight our topic today, I want you to join me in celebrating the industry that breeds innovation, not only during the month of October, but all year round. So thank you to all of our manufacturers for what you do for our economy and what you do for our workforce. The topic that our keynote presenter will touch on is a topic that is top of mind for everyone in all industries right now. That's people. Our keynote speaker, Thom Singer, as well as our panel later in the presentation, will all focus on human capital and people, as they are the single most important part of your organization. Ensuring that you're able to cultivate an environment that people want to work and do business is critical to your success. Before I introduce Thom, I just want to highlight a couple things that really stand out and make him such a valuable asset to our presentation this morning. Thom is an author and a speaker. He also has a podcast called Making Waves at Sea Level. He speaks to associations and companies about creating engagement and building trust with their people all over the country. So we're very excited to have him today. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Thom and let him take over from here.
Well, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be with all of you today, and hopefully we'll have some fun along the way. I'm going to talk for a little bit, and then we're going to have a great panel discussion, and then we'll go to Q&A. And so I want to encourage all of you to be an active participant into this entire webinar time that we have together over the next 90 minutes. There's two ways that you can do that. Number one, you can use the chat room. And number two, if you have questions that you want to ask when we get to the Q&A, you can use the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom webinar, kind of right below where I am. But also, I would love for you to use the chat. Now, I can't monitor it necessarily while I'm speaking, but I can see it out of the corner of my eye. So I have a little code I would like you to all use. If during the course of my presentation, I say something and you're like, oh yeah, that's important to our company, or oh yeah, I totally agree, use an exclamation point or 2 or 3 or 37 in the chat room. And when I see little exclamation points come along, it's similar to in the old days before most things I've done the last year and a half being over a virtual platform. Back when I used to come into a town like Winona and go to a ballroom and everybody would come sit there in front. If I said something that the audience agreed, I could see people go like, oh yeah. Now, sometimes I'm going to say things you're like, that's not the way it works for our company, or that's not my experience. And that's okay, because there's a lot of different experiences and ways that people connect and engage with others. If I say something you disagree with, I'm cool with that. Put a number 2 in the chat room, because that basically says, Thom, I think you just went number 2 on that topic. And along the way, if you have questions, use the Q&A and you can do that. And we'll try and get to as many of those at the end and during the panel as we possibly can. So moving along here, I've got to get my slides to adjust. There we go. Today, I'm going to talk to you about uncommon connections and why we are stronger together, because we live in a world where people really matter. And if we didn't learn that over the last 18 months, I don't know what we did learn, because we were impacted in so many ways. However, when they bring me in to speak inside companies or at chamber events or association conferences, sometimes people think, oh my gosh, they brought in the networking guy for an hour? and they'll sort of roll their eyes. Now, if we were in the ballroom together, I could see you roll your eyes. I don't know now if you do that, but what I want to do through the course of this presentation is just change your perspective a little bit on this topic of human engagement and look at it in a different way. So I want to start with a quick story. I was born into a family where I was the youngest of 4 boys. God save my mother. And at the time that I was born, my brothers were ages 10, 12, and 14, which meant by the time I was 3 years old, I lived in a house with 3 teenagers whose whole purpose in life was to torment me. Now, that's not fair. My brothers were great brothers. In fact, we have a wonderful relationship as adults. I was just at my nephew's wedding this weekend. We were all together for the first time in a long time. However, when I was little, they had a little bit of fun at the expense of having a baby brother. And my first memory in life was we had rented a beach house in Southern California. I grew up in the suburbs of Los Angeles, and my mother loved the beach. So every year we would rent this little beach house. Now, the Newport Beach of Southern California in the 1970s was not the Newport Beach of today, with Kardashian-style mansions lining Seashore Boulevard. Back in the 1970s, it was little teeny wooden beach shacks, and my family couldn't afford one that was big enough for 6 people, so we rented a little 2-bedroom. My parents had the master, and they put me in this tiny converted closet that just had a twin bed. And my brothers had to sleep in sleeping bags out in the living room. Now, I will tell you, as an adult, I realized that having your own room with a door is a total score. But I ask you this question: what is cooler to a 3-year-old than a sleeping bag? And the answer is nothing. And so I would wake up in the mornings and I would play with those sleeping bags. I would build tent cities. I would pretend I was camping. And my earliest memory is one time I crawled to the bottom of a sleeping bag and the boys rolled me up in it and they zipped me up in it. And then they proceeded to toss me to one another. And then they told me they were putting me on the top shelf of the closet and that I shouldn't move because the shelf was narrow. And if I moved, I could fall off. I could break my arm. I could die. And then they left me to go play on the beach. And I did what any 3-year-old would do. I freaked out and started screaming for my mother, who, of course, came running to my rescue. And when she got there, she said, "What's the matter?" And I said, "Help me. I am on the top shelf of the closet." And my mom said, "Sweetheart, you're on the living room floor." And I said, "No, I'm on the top shelf of the closet. The boys told me so." And my mom said something I never have forgotten. And she said, "That's your perspective because that's what you heard. But just because someone tells you something or you come to believe that it's true, it doesn't mean it is. You have to explore a little bit more." And she encouraged me to roll myself out of the sleeping bag by myself. And I said, "No." And she made me do that. And when I did, I came out and I was on the living room floor. I tell you this story not to make my brothers sound like monsters. I tell you this story because all of us come into things, our business, our life, our personal life, our community, our faith community, with preconceived notions of what something's about. And today, as we talk about the human connection side of business, many of you already have thoughts about how it works in your company, how it works in your community. And what I'd like you to do is just change that perspective for the next 20 minutes or 30 minutes or so, and come along on this journey as we talk about how do you create more uncommon connections. What does that mean? And how does it help you as an individual, each of your employees, and how does it help your company grow and expand? So why does connecting even matter? Why is this even important? You've got work to do. You're in the manufacturing space. You're building product. You're shipping product. You're keeping customers happy. Why do we care about how we feel about each other inside the company, in the community, with our vendors and clients and beyond? Well, number one, the old cliche is very true. People do business and choose to be around and choose to stay working for a company when they know, like, and trust each other. And people say, "Well, Thom, that's a cliche. I've heard that before." People do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. But think about it in your own life. When all things are equal, who do you do business with? You do business with those people that you know, you like, and you trust. And an example is my wife and I have gone through, in the course of a 30-year marriage, we've owned 5 different Hondas. We bought the first Honda after the first child was born 24 years ago, and it was time to get a minivan. And in the city where I live in, there are 2 Honda dealers. And one of them, we walked in, they showed us some cars. The other one took an interest in us. They wanted to know why. They wanted to know if used was better than new. They took an interest. They got to know us. And over the time we were shopping, we got to know them. We liked them. We trusted them. We bought the car from them. And then we proceeded over the years to buy 4 more Hondas. Now, the other dealer, I'm sure, was great, but they didn't get that human connection piece with us. And once we bought the one car, they were great at customer service. We kept coming back. So people will do business with people they know, they like, and they trust. We never went back to the other dealer ever when we were looking for a car. So it's so important that you build those relationships. Number 2, knowing other people and knowing them well and having a real human connection. It makes it so much easier for you and the people on your team to deal with the tough questions that come up in business. Something will inevitably go wrong in your company. And when you know people, and you know people in similar type businesses who've experienced similar type things, you just have to make one phone call and you can find out the answer. It's so much better when you don't live on an island. When you are part of a community, you can get more done because someone in that community has had the experience and had the problem that you need to solve. Number 3, having a great network for not just your senior executives, but everybody within your company, having them well connected into your community and beyond makes it raises that visibility of your company, which of course we think of from a sales standpoint. It's great when you have that reputation and that brand that goes out into the community, but it also helps with recruiting. And in today's age, that is one of the top topics that companies tell me when we talk about having me come in and do a training for their team. One of the big things is, will you touch on recruiting? Will you touch on retention? This is what's on the top of mind of business leaders today. So making sure that everyone in your community is out there talking up your community, growing their connections, and being known just makes all of this so much easier. And then finally, for the individual, it helps you advance your career because opportunities are going to come from the people who you know. When people have an opportunity to bring business to your company, to offer you a promotion, to hire you to your next opportunity, they're only going to talk to 3 or 4 people. If you're not one of those 3 or 4 people, that opportunity never comes your way. So the trick is you have to be making those short lists where you and your company are being considered for whatever opportunities are out there that will help you advance. So I'm talking about human engagement. Now, lots of times people roll their eyes, as I said in the start, when we talk about networking. They're like, oh, I hate going to those networking events. There's cheap wine and stale cheese. Networking is not wine and cheese. Networking is building long-term and mutually beneficial relationships with people where all of you involved in the relationships will find more success along the way. So I call it human engagement. And sometimes people are like, yeah, I'm not really that much of an extrovert. I don't know how to meet people. I'm not good at it. And when I go to those Chamber of Commerce events, there's so many people, I don't even know where to start. So I'm going to give you a trick. The next time you're in a crowd of people, how can you make connections? And that is E equals MC squared. Now people look at me and they go, Thom, isn't that Einstein's theory? I'm sure it is. I'm not that smart. However, I have stolen E equals MC squared and I have changed it up and I'm giving it to you as a tool, as a way that'll make it easier if you're a little bit more on the introverted side, or you have employees who don't know how to engage in the community. How can you do that? If you walk into a room, and by the way, you may have noticed I'm an extrovert. If we were in a room together, I would have met all of you before we started this presentation. I would have walked around to all the tables. I am married, though, to a very serious introvert. My wife runs an association. She's the meeting planner for an event, so she knows how to turn it on. But she doesn't like being in a room, walking in cold to 300 people. But she can do it because she's learned the trick of E equals MC squared. When you walk in, don't be overwhelmed by all the people who seem like they all know each other. Instead, just realize that engagement, E, equals meaningful connections, MC, squared, between 2 or more people. That's all it is. You don't have to talk to everybody in the room. When you go to a networking event, if you're a little bit more on that shy side, just tell yourself, I just have to meet 1, 2, or 3 people tonight. I don't have to worry that there's 300 people here. I just need to engage with a small handful of people. Walk up to somebody who's standing by themselves and just remember, if we have a meaningful connection, just a good conversation, maybe that will lead to a relationship down the line that will help grow the visibility for me and my company. Now, lots of times when organizations like your chamber bring someone like me in to do a training, a lot of time is spent teaching people how to create elevator pitches. And most of you have probably had this training at some time during your career. This goes back 30 years easily, that business people have been taught the importance of creating an elevator pitch. Now, if you're not familiar with what that is, though, the idea is that you pre-craft one or two sentences that are often quippy or unique or funny, where when you meet somebody for the first time, you immediately tell them about yourself with your elevator pitch. But I have a problem with that. While it is important to be able to clearly and concisely tell people who you are and what you and your company do so well, people don't want you to lead with yourself. In fact, when people first meet you, they don't care about you. Do you know who they care about? They care about themselves. And thank you to Mike and Jose for those exclamation points, for agreeing on those points. I just saw that pop in on the chat room. People are more concerned with themselves when they first meet you, and that's okay. You are as well. So when you meet someone for the first time, don't just flick a switch. The idea of the elevator pitch would be, if you and I got into an elevator together on the 30th floor, and I realized that your company does team training, and I go, oh, I speak at companies. And I wanted to immediately let you know who I was and what I did so well. As soon as I found out what you did, it's as if I flick an imaginary switch in my back and I look at you and go, hi, my name is Thom Singer. I talk on networking and connection and trust to companies just like yours, blah, 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 just verbal vomit all over you. Now, if I did that in an elevator and we got to the lobby, when those elevator doors opened, what would you do? If you're really quick at typing, put it into the chat room. If I just talked in the elevator, the whole 30 floors going, here's who I am, here's how cool I am, what would you do when we got to the lobby? Let's wait and see if somebody would put it in the chat room. The number one answer that I get when I speak to audiences is, oh, there you guys are. Mandy said it, get out as fast as I could. Katie says run. Michelle wouldn't run, but she would walk away very fast. Number one answer that people say, and they shout it out when we're together in ballrooms. I go, what would you do if all I did on the elevator was say that? They say I would run. Nobody has ever said, I would take you to the Starbucks in the lobby and buy you coffee so I could learn more. So we're teaching people to lead with these quippy elevator pitches. However, the problem with that is it repels people. People would walk away fast. They'd run. They'd get out as fast as they could. We don't want to do that when we're connecting in our greater community. So what I teach people to do is to instead have a few questions planned where you can talk to people about them, about the community, about why they participate in the Chamber of Commerce, about what's important to them, about what challenges they face. The more you get someone else to talk, the more they like you. They've actually done surveys on this at like graduate schools where they've gone out and surveyed people. And you've probably seen things like this on reality television. They take a camera and they hide it. They send a couple out like on a blind date. And they hide a camera in the flowers. They float a microphone in the beer and they record everything. And then when it's over, they interview them in separate rooms. The person who talked the most says, wow, I love them. I hope we get married and have 4 kids. The person who talks the least says, yeah, I don't know if I want to go out with them again. So if you can get the other person to talk in the first few minutes, asking them 2 or 3 questions, they're going to be drawn to you a little bit more. And then most people will turn around and ask you questions. Now, sometimes people go, Thom, what if they don't ask me questions? What if I ask them all these questions and then they go off and network with someone else? They did you a favor. They showed that they're not interested in creating that long-term and mutually beneficial relationship. So don't get stuck on the idea of the elevator pitch. Have one so that when it's your turn to say who you are, you can clearly and concisely share that, but don't lead with it. Now, over the course of the last 18 months, what I did, because as a professional speaker, you can imagine companies weren't doing meetings, associations weren't doing annual conferences, and we had to pivot to this virtual space. I created a program I was teaching, and it's now sort of going away because we're getting back to face-to-face, but I created a program called Social Tightening while social distancing. And it's more important now than ever for everyone on this call and for everyone who works in your company. Are we thinking about relationships? Because we were told we had to social distance. It was for our health. It was important. We had a serious global pandemic problem. However, we can't let relationships die because we've been distanced for 18 months. So along the way, I've been trying to help people think about how do we social tighten while we're social distancing. And now that the doors are starting to open up, fingers crossed, that the health conditions are now allowing us to get out there again, what can you do to socially tighten? So number one, you can reach out. Be the person who touches people in your network, in your community, in the organizations you belong to, within your company, and just find out how they're doing. If you haven't talked to them or seen them in a while, be the person who takes action and does the outreach, because some people won't do it. Some people are shy. They don't know how. They're afraid of what people are going to say, but most people are going to be thrilled to hear from you. So be the person who takes the action to reach out. Number two, as you connect and reconnect with people, be sure you're adding value. You can only call up once and say, hey, I'm calling to touch base. If you do that again 3 weeks later, you're the touch base person. So when you reach out, try to provide value. So when you're reading business things, when you're reading things about better, things in manufacturing, better things in HR, who do you know at other companies who could benefit from that article that you just read? If you have something to reach out and say, I read this and thought of you based on that conversation we had, I knew this was important, you're adding value. Who doesn't want to hear from people who are adding value? So be that person who's always looking for the interesting things that are there. Don't just send things randomly. Make sure there's a connection. But when you add value, you stand out. Number three, use the electronic digital tools that exist. We're having this meeting by Zoom. 2 or 3 years ago, we may not have done it that way. We may have gone to that hotel ballroom and had the meeting in person, but we now have amazing tech tools. I want you to think for a minute. What if this pandemic had hit in 1997? I know some of you are too young. You're like, I was in junior high, but many of you are like, oh my gosh, in 1997, we barely had email. The internet existed, but not everybody had it. We didn't have the tools to be able to connect and reconnect and stay connected. We now have all kinds of amazing tools. And while I believe face-to-face is a special, unique thing for humans, we have the tools to at least stay in good contact. So use Zoom, use Facebook, use LinkedIn, use YouTube, whatever it is that you can do to make sure that you're staying visible and connected with the people in your world is important. And be creative in the ways you connect. One client I worked with was a lawyer in the cannabis industry. And when the entire world shut down for that month where we barely left our houses, she did what so many people did, and she started baking like crazy. Her and her kids just baked cookies all the time. And at Christmas the year before, one of her clients had given her some cookie cutters in shapes that reflected their industry. Now, I'm not saying this is good or bad. I'm not having an opinion, but where they live, it's a legal industry. And so she used the cookie cutters to make some cookies. And then she mailed them to all of her clients with a note that said, by the way, these are regular sugar cookies, wink, wink. And I'm sending them to you because I've been baking like crazy and I don't want to eat 4,000 cookies. My kids and I just keep making cookies. I thought you would get a kick out of these. She was creative. It was different. It was something about their industry. And it was a cookie. Who doesn't want a cookie? And 100% of the people she sent them to called her, not emailed, not texted. Everybody she sent called and laughed because her note was funny. It was poignant. It was industry specific, and it stood out. And through these calls, she came up with the idea that she was going to host an industry think tank Zoom call every single month until the pandemic ended. And for the past 14 months, once a month, she gets something like 50 to 100 people in her industry just to come together and talk about what they're doing. It doesn't have to be her industry. It can be any industry. If you get creative and find a way to bring people together and make them smile, you're going to stand out. And the fifth tip I have is be transparent. If this has been hard for you, it's been hard for your company, don't be those people who pretend like everything's fine. For many people, the last 18 months have been hard. People got sick. People had loved ones who passed away. People had their industries really get hit hard. Some industries, like the one I live in, shut down. Now, others in certain things went up. I mean, certain manufacturing companies that I know had their best year ever because they manufactured things like sports equipment or outdoorsy things. And all of a sudden people were doing that. Awesome. But if you were on the opposite side of that, just let people know, yeah, it's been a rough year. People want to support people who are scrappy and who are honest about where things are. So I tell people, don't be Debbie Downer. Don't be Eeyore, like, oh, it's so horrible. But be transparent. If things haven't been great, just say, yeah, but we're scrappy. We're going to get through this too. So I talk about this idea of uncommon connections. When I started speaking about 12 years ago, the iPhone was brand new. The smartphone was just coming to be. And everybody thought, oh, we're never going to have to go to networking events again because we have all of these online digital tools, LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. We can just click our way to more business. Now, some people have seen huge impacts of business because of social media. but most of us have not. I was in a room recently with business leaders for an organization in the town that I live in. I had 120 people in the audience, and I said, most of them were in their 50s. And I said, who thinks their business gets way more sales or just a lot more sales because of social media than you did 15 years ago? Nobody raised their hands because they weren't in that sort of influencer world. They were in manufacturing and they were in services. And they said, it's nice, we use it, it keeps us visible, but our phone doesn't ring because of it. Well, we were sort of told 12 years ago, speakers were like, this is going to change everything. And everybody was trying to link to everybody they could on all of these social tools. But now most people I talk to in business have 500, 1,000, 3,000, 5,000 connections just on LinkedIn. And yet, very few of those people do they talk to ever. And very few of those people send them leads or bring them business that wasn't expected through other channels. So I say that social media has become common. Our likes, our links, our shares, and our follows, those are just common links. They don't really mean very much. And yet you have some people in your life, in your greater network, who are uncommon connections. And you probably can only have 5 or 10 of them. But these are people who've got your back. They look out for ways to refer you. And what you want to do is build more of those uncommon connections that are built on give and take. That is that mutually beneficial long-term relationship where you're thinking of each other and helping each other, whether it's inside the company or outside the company. Having those special uncommon connections that really can add value, those are the ones that matter. And those are the ones that we need to be focusing on. Because when you have a real human connection with somebody, you stand out from the crowd. If you're just someone they're connected to on LinkedIn or some other social media tool, you may not really have their attention. In fact, even if you post on these sites, often the people you're connected to don't even see what you posted because they've written algorithms to decide what you should see. It may not be what you really want to see. It's what the algorithm has decided. Real human conversation, connection, and shared experiences. That's how you stand out. And from an internal standpoint, networking inside the company is so important. There was a survey done about 25 years ago by the Gallup organization where they said that when people have a best friend at work, meaning someone who they really like, they do Thanksgiving with their family, they hang out together on the weekends, they do barbecues. When they have a best friend at work, they are way more likely to stay at that company and not leave. Now think about that for a minute. If your employees have friendships with each other, they're more likely to stay. Gallup redid that survey just before the pandemic and found the same thing is true. It is harder to leave a company where you have amazing friendships than where there's just people who you cross paths with every day from 9 to 5 or whatever hours it is that you work. So you want to make sure that you're cultivating this culture within your company of helping people network with each other. We think of networking as an external senior executive or salesperson's thing, but it's really something for everyone in the company because internally, building those long-term and mutually beneficial friendships mean you have a retention tool. And that is super important because shared experiences build relationships. This is why I encourage companies to make sure that you're doing things beyond just punching a clock and doing your work. You want to make sure that you have those company functions, maybe those after hours things, maybe that barbecue on the weekends, because when people share experiences together, that's how they bond and that's how they build friendships. So internally, we want to be looking to do that. And as we're trying to draw people to maybe come work at our company, we want them to see that we're a company of shared experiences. Because if you were going to change jobs, and maybe some of you want to, would you want to go to a company that was cold and distant? Or would you want to go to a company where people had friends and people did stuff together and it was exciting? Most people, whether they're an introvert or an extrovert, want to feel part of something. And that's why this shared experience thing is so important for the success and the growth of your company in so many ways. So your company's employees, they're your secret weapon to recruiting. Did I spell recruiting wrong in the bottom there? Recruiting. Sorry about that. I created this PowerPoint just for you. That's a new slide. That slide right there was a picture from Napa Valley at the wedding I was at on Saturday. So we'll call it recruiting, not recruiting, but it is the secret weapon for you to be able to get more people to come to your company. Because if the people on your team are out there singing the praises of what a great place it is to work, they are going to want their friends there and their friends are going to want to be there. And here's the thing. If you have a job opening and you tell your employees, hey, we're looking for this, and some people give a bonus if they recruit somebody, you don't even have to do that. People want to bring in the good people. They're not going to tell that cousin or that neighbor who is just a downer, who just always is like bringing everybody, they suck the energy out of the room as soon as they walk in. Your employees don't want that person in the workplace, but the person who works hard, who rolls up their sleeves, who contributes, they want those people. So your secret weapon is to make sure that your people are talking up what you have to offer. And at the same time, let your employees know that you see them as their secret weapon, because that will empower them to go forward and help promote your company. Well, let's face it. We live in a world where there are more distractions than ever. So even your employees will be like, how can I be your secret weapon? I have so much work to do during my shift. I can't get it all done. What are you talking about? We have more distractions now than we've ever had, ever. So my dad, that's a picture of him you're seeing. He was born in 1913. I'm sorry, he was born in 1914, and he lived until 2013. He passed away 8 years ago, just a few months shy of his 100th birthday. I had a really good run. But if you think about it, think of the 100 years and that my dad lived in. Now, I realize you guys are looking at this picture. You realize this is like 9 years old. This is about a year before he died. And you're thinking, wait a minute, if Tom's dad was born in 1913, how the heck old is Thom? So I'm 55 years old. My dad was 52 when I was born. Yeah, he was 52 years old when I was born. If he was still alive today and he was with us on this call, he would tell all of you that I was a surprise. You guys know what a surprise is? That's an accident that worked out really well because they liked me. But my dad was pretty cool. And he lived in this era where he was born 11 years after the Wright brothers flew at Kitty Hawk. And he passed away when there was a space station above us at all times and we had the internet being used. He saw the most amazing changes. And I said, Dad, what are the biggest changes you've seen in people? And he said, people haven't changed at all. I said, that's not true. I go, there are people in my industry who teach about the differences in the generations. They make millions of dollars telling people how to change to be able to relate to millennials and Gen Zs. He said, people haven't changed. What has changed is the tools we use to communicate. And we have allowed those tools to become a constant distraction. So my dad said he played a little game. Every time someone would come to the retirement village where he lived, he would sit there, they'd come in the door. He usually knew they were coming because people would call. And these would be my brothers and I, maybe his grandkids, maybe some nephews and nieces, some former neighbors. People would come to see him. And he would look on the clock on the wall when they would walk into his room. And he said, I would wait to see how long until they checked their phones. He said the average person waited about 3.5 minutes. And he found it fascinating that they would come to visit him. And he goes, they're coming to visit me because I'm going to die soon. He was pretty healthy, but he's like, I'm 99. There's no cure for 99. And he said, they come to visit me. And within 5 minutes, they are looking at their phone. And he goes, Thom, you do it too. Your brothers do it. The grandkids do it. He goes, everyone does it. Because we live in a world where we've let the distractions of technology take over. And I said, Dad, I don't know. I still think people are different. He goes, go read the Bible. Now, he wasn't an extremely religious person. I said, what do you mean? He said, if you read any story in the Bible, you're going to find stories about lust and greed. You're going to find stories about war and famine. You're going to see stories about businesses and business dealings that went well and some that did not go well. He goes, and you're going to hear about political leaders that were adored. And you're going to hear about political leaders that were not liked. He goes, does that sound familiar? It's the same thing that's on the news today. People haven't changed. The stories, the struggles that we face are still the same. It's the distractions that we have from technology. And he said, Thom, whenever you're with people, remember while you're in that room, choose people. Is that what happens when when you go to an event? Do you put your phone in your purse or your pocket and leave it in your pocket the whole time you're at an event? Or while you're talking to somebody at a function, do you take out your phone and do this? Now, if somebody does that to you, what do you think? You think, God, that's rude, or that's disconnected, or hey, look at me. But what do you call it when you do it to them? We call it being efficient. We call it multitasking. But the reality is, if you're looking at your phone while you're talking to somebody else, you're not engaged. You are distracted, and they may find it as rude. So my dad was right. When you're with people, choose people. And what you want to look for is you want to look for shared commonalities. You want to look for things that you have in common with people that you don't have in common with everybody. So I had an experience recently where I was up to possibly be the speaker at a company meeting, and the meeting planner was like, "Oh, you're perfect. Your topic is perfect." But it was a technology organization, and the CEO did not think I was the right choice, but he agreed to do a phone call. So I looked him up on LinkedIn before we did the call. So LinkedIn can be a great tool for finding information. And it said that he had gone to Carnegie Mellon University in Pittsburgh. So when we got on the call, the first thing I said to him is, "I looked you up on LinkedIn. I saw you went to CMU." And he got so excited on the phone call. He goes, "Did you go to Carnegie Mellon?" And I said, "No, all my money did," because my daughter graduated last year from Carnegie Mellon. And he laughed. He thought that was a funny line. And then we talked about the city of Pittsburgh and how much he loved living in Pittsburgh when he was there. And we talked about the restaurants that he ate at as a college student 40 years ago, 30 years ago. And the restaurants that I ate at with my daughter were still there. And we had this great conversation. And at one point on the call, he says to his meeting planner, "Send him a contract." We never talked about the details of the speech because we found a shared commonality. We found something in common. And when you can do that with people, it fast forwards your relationship. And that's why you want to ask questions and you want to listen and you want to be engaged, because all opportunities in life come from people. The chair you're sitting in right now, awesome chair. I don't think anyone's chair collapsed during the past half hour, but it's not going to send you any leads. However, the people who are on this call, if you use the chat room and you look who in your community is here, those people can help you. They can help solve problems that you have, because all opportunities any of us are going to face in life can be solved by knowing the right people. So you have to be curious about people. You have to ask questions. You have to lead to find out more about them, because here's the secret. Success leaves clues. Teach yourself, teach your employees, teach the people in your community to dig deeper, because superficially, people make a lot of judgments. And people say, "Well, that's not fair." Well, I don't care if it's fair. It's how we are. We make superficial judgments about other people all the time. But when you get curious and you ask questions and you dig deeper, it can change your whole view of a person. So remember, be curious about people and look for their successes, because they can't help it. They leave an idea, a theory, a nugget behind, because success leaves clues. And as I wrap up my portion of today's talk, before we go to the panel with three people from your community, as I wrap up my part, I want to remind you that everything I've talked about will help you advance your career. All of it will help your business thrive internally and externally. But here's the thing to remember. It's not just about business. Anytime you engage with other humans, anytime you have a networking conversation, anytime you have a chit chat with somebody, the person on the other side of that conversation, that other carbon-based life form, they have their own stuff going on in life. And it's not just about work. We're not just silos. We're not just at work during our shift and we're at home during that, and we're somebody else at our kids' ball game. We're intertwined, complex individuals. And when you deal with other people, sometimes they have bad stuff going on in their life. Sometimes they have good stuff. The good stuff, maybe they just got married. Maybe they just had their first child, or better, their first grandchild. Maybe I talked to somebody. One of the questions I ask people all the time after I speak at an event is I say, "What's the good stuff in your life?" I had a woman say to me a couple of years ago, and I'll never forget it. She goes, "My husband and I just sold our business for $42 million. Well, that is good stuff. Celebrate people's wins. When people have good stuff, send them a card, buy them a bottle of wine, give them a thumbs up, whatever it takes. Just let them know that that's good stuff. But here's the thing to remember. Sometimes bad things happen to really good people. And I'm not talking about your brother, your cousin, your best friend. I'm talking about people in your community, in your faith community, at work. They're going through rough times, and we all hear about it because people talk. And it's not just gossip. People aren't telling stories to be malicious. Human beings are wired to tell stories. Throughout the centuries, we tell stories to educate the next generation. You know, a pie chart or a handout was not the way ancient man educated the next generation. They did it through telling stories. So people can't help it. We tell stories. And when people have something bad going on in their life, when things aren't going right, everyone hears about it. Now, the bad stuff could be they get divorced, they get fired, their company goes bankrupt. Maybe they're dealing with a health issue, or something happens to their spouse, or worse, something happens to one of their kids. And I know this firsthand because when my youngest daughter was born, I told you my older daughter is a recent college graduate from CMU. When my younger daughter was born, she was born with a medical condition where the bones in her head had fused together and her brain wasn't able to grow properly, and it wasn't diagnosed right. It should have been diagnosed at birth. And when it was diagnosed, she was 5 months old. And in order to save her from having an elephant man-like deformity and probably some brain damage, you had to do the surgery by 6 months. So we were under the wire. And I had a high-profile job in Austin, Texas. I was the marketing director for the largest technology law firm. And we would host events. We would sponsor events. I often had to work the check-in table, or I had to, sometimes I was on stage as the master of ceremonies because I had this ability to communicate. And so I would be on stage and I could see it. Everybody in town knew, even if they didn't know me, they knew what our kid was going through. And people would see me at these events and they would look at me and go like, oh, and they'd look at their shoes and they'd walk away. We so often don't know what to say. So we say nothing. But when people are going through bad stuff, that's when we need each other the most. So there were other people, some who I knew, some who I didn't, who would see me from across the room and they would beeline to me and give me a hug. They would say things like, can we cook dinner for you and your older daughter? Because I know your wife is traveling, because she would take the baby to look for a doctor. There was no state-of-the-art doctor at that time in our city. We now have one, but we didn't then have the best children's hospital. So my wife was every couple of days flying somewhere with the baby to see a doctor. She was taking Kate on planes. People would say, hey, can I give you some free tickets on Southwest Airlines? I never use my free tickets. Who doesn't use their free tickets? This was their way of saying, I see you have a problem and I want to help. And one night during all of this, we'd already settled on a doctor. Kate was just about to turn 6 months old, and they wanted to do the surgery by 6 months old. We got a call at 1:30 at night from somebody in our extended network. And I answered the phone. I'm like, hello? And they identified themselves. And this wasn't a 1:30 in the morning phone call kind of friend, if you know what I'm saying. And I was like, yeah? And he goes, Thom, I just got off the phone with my first cousin. And I'm like, yeah? And he goes, Thom, my first cousin is one of the top pediatric neurosurgeons in the world. I said, we've talked to like 5 of them. Who is your first cousin? And he told me, and I said, oh, yeah, I've read about him, but you can't get in to see him for 3 months. And we were diagnosed late. We have to do the surgery in the next few weeks. And I said, and we've settled on a doctor. I'll never forget what this person said to me. He said, Thom, don't settle. My cousin's expecting your call at noon Pacific time tomorrow. So the next day at 2 o'clock in Texas, I cleared my calendar and I called Rady Children's Hospital in San Diego and I asked for Dr. Meltzer. And they patched me through to his assistant. And she said, oh, Mr. Singer, he's expecting your call. And the next thing I knew, I was on the phone with one of the top few pediatric neurosurgeons in the world talking about the surgery and the new type of surgery that he had helped pioneer. It was less invasive. Instead of removing the entire top of the skull in one piece, he would go in through small cuts and take out little pieces of bone, allowing room for the brain to grow. And he said, the bones in her skull, if we do it right and we do it soon, will probably grow back. What part of that wasn't reassuring? Probably. But we talked to him and he said, I want to see her tomorrow. The next day, my wife and Kate got on an airplane and they flew to San Diego, California to see the cousin of somebody in my network who I had developed enough of a relationship with that they felt they could call and share at 1:30 in the morning. And that night, my wife called me and said, get Jackie, our 5-year-old, and get out here. He's the first doctor to show urgency. And I asked the doctor, I said, how many times have you done this new surgery? And he said 13. God, I wanted him to say 497. But my wife said he had the urgency and he had a surgical room ready on Friday if we could get out there and we could get insurance to improve it. The next day, we started the ball in the motion. 2 days later, Jackie and I flew to San Diego. And on Friday morning of that week, we handed Kate over to the doctors at Rady Children's Hospital. And 4 hours later, they called my cell phone and said, the words I'll never forget. They said, Kate is going to be fabulous. Now, I tell you this story, not because you are ever going to need a pediatric neurosurgeon, I hope. I tell you this story because in your life, in your community, in your company, in your faith community, in your family, you're going to need something. You're going to need someone, and someone who you could connect with, their first cousin, might hold the answer to what you need. And what those doctors told me on that call, today, Kate is fabulous. Kate is a sophomore at Dartmouth College. She is beautiful. She's outdoorsy. She's an activist. The bones did grow back. Her skull looks more like a cantaloupe than a watermelon. It's exactly what was supposed to happen. She's smart. She never let it hold her back. And I tell you what, had we gone with the original doctor, I'm sure we would have had the same results and Kate would still be an Ivy League student today. But I tell you this story because when you can make a connection and you can find someone who you trust, and trust can be passed on through people in your network. I trusted this doctor more because I knew his first cousin. When you can transfer that trust, when you can transfer that connection, amazing things can happen in your personal life, in your business, etc. But here's the thing, you and everyone in your company, everyone has to do this consistently. And you have to do it over that long run. You have to do it consistently, and you can't expect results within 3 months. If you have a recruiting or a retention issue, you can't change it through human engagement in 2 weeks. It takes time to build the types of relationships we're talking about. In fact, sometimes it can take 3 to 5 years before people see the results that I've seen them have by really paying attention to that human element of business. But if you wait 3 to 5 years to start, it's going to take 3 to 5 years to get the results. There's an old Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. And that's true for building your network too. The longer ago you started, the more results you're going to have now. But that proverb says the best time to plant a tree was 30 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. So if any of this resonates for you, for your organization, make sure that you start practicing that human connection, that you're looking to build those uncommon connections, not just likes, links, shares, and follows. So at this point, I would love to invite the panelists to unmute themselves, to turn on their cameras, and to join us here. I'm going to stop my screen share for just a minute, and I would like to welcome them all here. Mike, Stan, and Randy, thank you for being with us today and for being part of this panel. So let me stop my screen share so we can all join each other. There we are. Good to see everybody's smiling faces today. So I want to start off by letting each of our 3 panelists introduce themselves, who they are, what company they work for, but I would like them to add what part of that presentation really resonated with them. And then we'll go into some Q&A that I have prepared for them, for the panel, but also for those of you watching, if you have questions for me, for the panel, start putting those in that Q&A box. That would be the best thing to do. So Mike, why don't we start with you?
You got it. My name is Mike Kryling, one of the owners of Express Employment Professionals. One of the ways that I can help add to this conversation is each week, my team's put to about 500 people to work at over 150 manufacturers across Southeast Minnesota and Wisconsin. And the thing that really hit home for me the most, Thom, was, wow, a lot of it. You really nailed the recruiting and the retention piece, because at the end of the day, wages are just going to keep going up. And who's going to win the war for talent? It's the people who care the most and who actually build that strong relationship. So there was a handful of pieces that really jumped out, but the adding value to the job seeker specifically is a big one.
Awesome. Randy, could you introduce yourself and tell us what resonated?
Certainly, Thom. Randy Skarlupka, VP of Operations for Miller Ingenuity. We're a supplier of mission critical rail parts to the rail industry for over 75 years. And for me, it was, again, the connections part, right? Especially as manufacturers, the relationships that we had with our suppliers really made the difference with material shortages. Those that were jumping from, to vendor had problems. We, with the relationships that we had, were able to make sure that we had continuation of supply. So that was very important.
Awesome. And Stan, welcome to the panel. Please introduce yourself and what resonated.
All right, I'm Stan Brightlow. I'm a chief system designer at Watlow, the mystery company in Winona. We make thermal control systems from food service to refrigerated trucking, and our biggest industry right now is semiconductor manufacturing. We're trying to help solve that chip shortage that's affecting everybody, including ourselves. What resonated with me is the importance of true, meaningful connections. Being honest and vulnerable and real makes it real, both with our customers and our employees and our coworkers, to keep that connection going and make it more than just a like.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's got to be more than those likes, links, shares, and follows can be seductive, but they aren't a human relationship. So Mike, I want to start with you as we go into the panel here, because I also work in sort of the high-end executive recruiting world as part of my life. And so you are constantly around people who are looking to fill staffing issues. So one of the questions I'd like to ask you is, how can employers use this whole focus on personal communication and people to their advantage when they're trying to recruit in the Winona area?
Great question. So to start things off on that, the answer for that, really it boils down to that first point of contact. If you think about trying to bring candidates in, when people are applying right now, they're applying at so many different positions. And usually it's this cold, go to our website and apply, fill this out, and we'll call you. The more that we can remember to build that personal connection right from the start, it makes a huge impact. We've taken our whole recruiting process and intake process, and it starts with a phone call. On that phone call, we don't ask you to fill out an online application. We walk through your work history with you over the phone and build a relationship. And we've really found that that connection helps us get more people placed more quickly. You know, the shelf life of great candidates right now is about 2 hours. And so if you, it's a crazy thing, but trying to find those best manufacturing candidates, everybody's knocking on their doors. The best thing that we can do is build that great connection right up front and get to know the candidate. And so one of the best ways, best first steps to take is just do a competitive shop of your own hiring process. If you were a job seeker trying to get a job with your company, how do you feel? Have a friend or a family member call in or go through the application process and see, are they building that personal connection or not? Because that does make a huge difference. And we've seen people take jobs for a lower pay rate because they get that sense of family. They get that right sense of connection.
Well, every survey that I've read, and I read a lot of this stuff because I work with companies just like you're talking about, every survey I've read said that people will take less money if they can work for a boss they know, they like, they trust. If they can work on a team that has that type of feeling, they'll do it. And of course, all the surveys show that it goes to retention as well. So
Right.
Randy and Stan, from the company side, from the actual manufacturing company side, do you have anything to add to what Mike was saying?
Yeah, something I was going to talk about is that beginning connection is a starter. And what I feel my role is to set that hook, saying, this is an exciting place to work. We're exciting people. Our customers are exciting, and, make a personal connection with what they would do, how that would make the world a better place. People want the world to be a better place, whether it's we heat treat windmill blades, to make, green energy. I'll even bring an example. Look at your iPhone. There's about, 50 chips in there. Every one of those will be touched by something you make personally. Even somebody on the assembly line, your quality of the part you make will go into a machine that makes your cell phone. And every time you look at that, realize I did that. And now there's a personal connection and a satisfaction they have, and they can take that home with them every day.
Nice. Randy, something to add to that?
Yeah, Tom, we've made a concerted effort in the community to really project ourselves and do the kind of things that our employees can be proud of and stuff on through there. So we see that resonating, throughout. And a lot of times candidates that come in, say that they heard about us on TV or from a friend or something like that about something we've done. So, again, that connection part of it is really important.
So Stan, you said something about like in that initial connection, it's so important to have that. So what can you do, go a little deeper on what you can do to help your company stand out to those potential employers, especially whether it's you directly or someone else on your team? What else can they do to help your company be like what I would call a destination workplace?
Sure. And I kind of talked about, the impact their work would have, but what would it be personally? What are you looking for in your life? People want to do meaningful work. That's part of it. But we also want to be in a culture that we feel is supportive of our values, whether it's, doing something cutting edge technically, or if it's, supporting green energy, any of those things. It's our culture is that. And we one of our company vision statements is enriching lives through inspired innovation. And that came from the top. And enriching lives, what does that mean? Whether it's making a heater for an incubator in an ICU for a baby, or it's, again, green energy, or it's your personal life. Are you doing something at work that's meaningful to you every day? Do I feel that I'm respected, that my input is heard? So all those things, really making it strike home with a culture that will support their values. And we want to make that seen to them.
Well, and that idea of values and company statements and all is so important. Randy, I noticed, because I'm doing research to be with you all today, I noticed on your website that one of your company values is community. And of course, that always rings true to me because that's what I teach companies, make that a value. So it was there on your website. How is that demonstrated, Randy, in your company?
Well, Tom, actually, our most recent example here is we just had an employee charitable donation campaign that was, again, company led here. Our United Way dissolved about 7 years ago. And so we took the opportunity ourselves to, again, provide an opportunity for our employees to be able to pick an organization that they would like to make donations to. And so we go through a process, we identify or nominate different 501Cs. They provide, do presentations for us. And then the employees pick the particular 501C that they want to support that year. And then we do a charitable donation campaign and stuff throughout the week. And it's been a huge success for us. In fact, the dollars that we've collected have been double what we did when we had the United Way campaign, and because they weren't as connected to that particular process.
Nice. So Mike, you work with a lot of companies, and of course we never want to throw anybody under the bus, so we don't want to name anybody, but I'm sure you've run across some companies that don't share the values of community and the stuff that Randy and Stan have talked about. Do those companies have a harder time placing people? Do they have a harder time finding those employees? Is there a direct correlation to this as well?
Oh, 100%. In a different one of our communities, we just did a test run of a specialized recruiting process specifically for this business. In the span of 3 weeks, we put out 13,000 outbound contacts, phone calls, texts to all people throughout the community. And what was interesting was we only got minimal employees hired from that, because what we found was the feedback that we kept getting was, oh, yeah, my friend so-and-so used to work out there and they really, that wasn't a good place to work and they didn't live their values. And the number of times that we heard negative connotations towards values was wild. So out of all the people that we placed during that same period of time, they got less than 10% of the candidates, even though they paid more, even though there were some really nice things about the position, because they didn't live those values. It was pretty brutal, actually.
So I think it's true whether you're in manufacturing, whether you're in services, whether you do what I do for a living, word of mouth. I mean, all of my business comes from word of mouth. So it is, I know from what I do for a living, but it's true for all of you that word of mouth marketing, and it's true for recruiting and retention. What's said about you goes a long, long way. Randy, I liked what you were talking about the way, the company kind of gets behind, giving to the community. I know that one thing that you do also is you support workforce development at the high school level. So I have an interesting tie to this. When I first started speaking in the manufacturing world, I was going to be speaking at a large conference of manufacturers, and they had seen me speak. They wanted me, and I was thinking, what do I have ties to this organization? And I was on the airplane flying there, and suddenly I remembered my great-grandfather had a manufacturing company in the 1800s all the way through to the Great Depression. That's when the family lost the business. But one of the stories about my great-grandfather is he sort of, I mean, not really, but he sort of invented STEM training, because he went to the high schools in the early 1900s in the major city where they were. And he said, the people who are coming out of high school aren't ready to work in my factories. And he and 3 other people came in and worked with the high schools to make people ready when they got out of high school to come to work. And we hear a lot about that type of training nowadays, but 100 years ago, that was not something that was done. So when I knew your company did this, I loved that, because I have this little bit of a tie to someone in my family history who was all about making sure we're educating people the right way to be able to fill these jobs. So what is your company doing?
Yeah, Tom, as Miller Ingenuity was the lead sponsor for the Chamber's led REACH program, which is again a high school career pathways initiative, and the focus is really on 2-year degrees for whether it's manufacturing, the trades, health and human services, and like you said. high school students today really don't know anything about like manufacturing or things like that. In fact, what they think about is what they read in a history book, and they see, Henry Ford's assembly line or something like that, or some, dark, dingy factory, right? And it couldn't be the farthest from the truth. When you look at the technology that's employed in our factories and stuff today, I would stand it up against any other opportunity or career path and stuff on there. So, we've made that a specific focus for us. And I think that the real beauty of that REACH program is the opportunity that we have for hosting immersions and internships for high school students. And so they can come in, they can explore those, different career paths and actually see it. And then, figure out, is that for them or not? And I think, both answers are equally important. If somebody can find something that clicks with them, great. And if you also decide that that's not what you want to do, that's also
awesome. And Stan, I know we talked a little bit about the fact that some of these issues to the people who are entering the workforce, there's different things that appeal to them. And so you have to get a little bit creative. So, expanding on what Randy said about what they do, what does your company do to help appeal to those entry-level people who are coming into the manufacturing world?
Yeah, it's going to be a variety of things. Technology, there's a lot of people coming up who are gamers, so how can you appeal to that? This is high tech work. We do a lot of design and innovation. So the innovation part of, bringing that in, it's not going to be, turning the crank when you come in here. You're being looked at to develop the next level of product, the next level of manufacturing system. Even if you're in the production environment, you're the facilitator of your production line. You aren't just the guy who, pulls the crank or anything. It's on you to make it flow, be creative. So creativity at every aspect of anywhere here is really important.
Awesome. Mike, from your standpoint, do you think that these programs where they're reaching out to the high school students and doing entry-level programming, when people know about those, people of all ages, does that help with recruiting and retention as well?
Oh, 100%. And I got to give some credit to Randy. I believe it was a couple of years ago. We sat at a table with Randy and the Miller Ingenuity team at one of the chamber banquets. And we were sitting right next to one of the folks who'd gone through the REACH program. And everything that you talked about, Thom, as far as building that reputation or that relationship, that was there loud and clear. And so as I look at that experience, just that short window that I had to peek in of how Miller Ingenuity takes care of those high school students, it was awesome. They built such a great reputation that student was eating it up. 100% was on board, and kudos to the team. They did a fantastic job of building that relationship, which is going to lead to recruiting. I can guarantee that student is talking about what a great experience they had at Miller.
Nice. So this question goes to all of you, and it can go beyond just what we're talking about here with the recruiting and the entry-level people, but this can go to the sales side of business. It can go to the recruiting and retention side, or it can go just to the company morale piece. And that is, do you have examples of where relationships and this whole idea of person-to-person interactions have been critical to your company's success, or maybe another company that you've seen? So why don't we go ahead and start with Stan?
Absolutely, on all sides. Sales side, we don't have to do a lot of developing new sales relationships because the ones we have are so strong that we're repeat customers. We're their go-to supplier, and they just keep coming back and coming back. Our biggest challenge is be able to meet their delivery, right, with everything ramping up right now. So we need to fill more people in to meet that. So that's a challenge, but that's based on a relationship. We wanted to be a product excellence company, and we have excellent products, but customer intimacy really is a huge key to success and growth internally. If there's somebody out in the floor and I want to say, this doesn't seem to be going right there, you have to have a relationship with your go-tos, and you want to go out there and say, I need a straight story. What's happening here? And they have to trust me enough to know that they can tell me whatever's going on, and I'll hear it right and fix it, and not, throw them under the bus for letting me know. So that kind of relationship has to go all ways.
Awesome. Mike, what about you?
So 100%. Without relationships, there's nothing. With my teams, we focus so much on hiring to our core values, living to those core values. And I think just the meeting people where they are, like you talked about towards the end of your presentation, last week, one of my teams just put up an epic performance, absolutely fantastic. They hit every metric and then some. It was awesome. And every week we do a one-on-one where we sit down and we just go through how did you do on your key metrics? Let's talk about work. What challenges do you face? In each of those, it was funny because I could tell everybody was just so worn out from that previous week, which was amazing. We actually just spent the one-on-one just talking about the one team member who was looking at buying some land and talking about that process. We spent the other one-on-one just talking with a team member who's going through a relationship issue and helping to coach there and look at how to move forward, and then getting both of them together to just have some fun and to celebrate. We also, it's amazing when you show how much you care about your team members. They take such great care of all of your customers and everyone involved in your organization. Relationships are everything.
Yeah, and you're right. It's sometimes if people are having that relationship issue or they're buying land and they've never done that before, just having somebody to chat with about it. They may not have that in other aspects of their lives. We can't assume that everybody has that support group outside of work. They said that when the pandemic hit, a lot of people discovered that their entire social structure, or most of it, was work. And when they got sent home, they said they study numbers of loneliness. And before the pandemic, the current Surgeon General, who was also Vivek Murthy, who was also the Surgeon General during President Obama's term, he had begun doing research. His first time he was Surgeon General, he started doing research on loneliness, and he found it was the underlying problem to many health issues as Surgeon General that he was exploring. And that pre-pandemic, going back 4 or 5 years, he called it the epidemic of loneliness, that people felt more distanced than ever before. And then come along 2020. On top of this, everybody was then asked to move home and only talk to people by Zoom. And so with that, this areas of being able to be there, be that support group, if you will, or be that connection, that human connection for the people in your company. They may need it more than you know.
Yeah.
So Randy, what about you guys? Where do person-to-person interactions hit the critical success for your organization?
Yeah, Tom, I think what intrigues me is the multiple levels that our sales team really has to connect at, right? When you first start, you're coming in, you're at the purchasing level and you having to do. But the reality is all of those particular opportunities really don't come to fruition until you get down, and I say, boots on the ground or get your hands dirty, right? And you're having to get into the shops with either the technical people or whatever and stuff and work through, and they're looking for you to help them solve their problems, right? And so if you're not doing that, you're not connecting and stuff. And we've had so many great new product development opportunities come out of those particular connections and stuff on there. So it, for us, it makes all the difference. You may not do a show or something like that, but when you take and cut out those actual customer visits and stuff on there, that can impact you greatly.
Absolutely. All right, we'll go to Q&A.
I had one more point on that. I think it's really important is, as leaders, it is all of our roles to help our up and coming people develop those relationships, provide the introductions, create some responsibility for that person to interact there. I don't want it all to go through me. That drives, my life's already full enough, right? But that's how they're going to develop. That's how they're going to develop more relationships, and there's more connectivity with our customers. So as leaders, we really need to take it on us to create that and make it happen.
And I'm finding, just because of what I do, that the topic of educating people to connect better is coming back. It's sort of cyclical. I started my speaking career during the 2008, 2009 recession, and connections was an important topic. Then the economy ran wild and everybody sort of didn't care as much. There wasn't as much of a demand for that topic. And I saw it in the work that I did and who was looking for it. As we're coming out, companies, associations, all kinds of organizations are really realizing, and I think that's one of the positives that we take away from what we went through the last 18 months. People matter more than ever, and people can't be taken for granted, or you end up in the situation where they're hard to find. So before we go to the Q&A, we've got a question coming in now into the Q&A box, and everybody who's watching, we'd love for you to ask some questions of the panel. That's what the Q&A box is there for. But the final question for all of you is, what do you see as the biggest or most overlooked challenge for manufacturing employers as we move into 2022? Maybe we've touched on it. Maybe it's something we haven't touched on. What are the biggest challenges that companies are facing? So let's see. We'll start with Randy this time.
Well, by far and away, it's got to be recruitment, right? There just isn't enough employees for all, excuse me, all of the different jobs that are out there. So, and I think, excuse me, hold on one second.
Yeah, I had to grab my water when you started coughing. I was triggering a cough right there.
Excuse me. So again, going back to everything that we've talked about, right? Culture, making sure that you're taking care of your employees, the relationships, all of that stuff is going to be so important because we don't want to lose the employees that we have right now to other companies and stuff on there. So making sure that you're shoring up that side and then doing the kind of things that are going to promote and encourage other people to take a look at your company.
Excellent. And Stan?
Two of them, and they're interrelated. Attritions, we've have an employee workforce that's been with us 20, 30, 40 years. We have 45-year employees, very experienced, very understanding of everything we do. Going forward, our business is growing rapidly. We're going to pretty much double our sales in Winona here in 3 or 5 years. Winona probably can't support that, just to be honest. We want to, but again, I'm competing against everybody on this call. But also our customer base is global now too. So our challenge is having to augment that and reestablish it in a global footprint close to our customers are, where there's a diversity of workforce. We have Mexico, Malaysia, Korea, those places. And we're going to have to use that. And then we're going to have to form these teams and these connections you were talking about worldwide. And that's a challenge too.
And Mike?
And both Randy and Stan have hit on this slightly differently. Retention, 100% retention. Retention is what's going to be what drives our recruiting. The better we treat our internal employees, the more referrals that we're going to get, bar none. One of the benefits of having multiple markets is the Eau Claire and Menominee markets always seem to be about 3 to 4 months ahead of where Winona is. Get this, guys, we just started hiring entry-level, zero experience needed, stocking the shelves at Walmart, $24 an hour. Yeah. Now, let me tell you, when you're paying your internal team to place those folks, I understand the same expression that Stan and Randy both shared there, but we're looking at $24 an hour for a starting pay rate. Now, to use Tom's terms, a common connection, they're going to get the heck out of Dodge, and they're going to take that higher wage. An uncommon connection where supervisors care, they take care of their people, they've built that relationship, they've built those friendships. Those team members will not only stay, but they'll actively pull their friends away from that higher paying position. 100% retention. That's the name of the game for 2022. We're a recruiting business, and our key strategy is retention.
Nice. And Stan brought up something I just wanted to comment on too, and that is because you're in a smaller community, sometimes that makes it harder, I'm sure, and I'm doing this from the outside, I'm sure that there's sometimes some poaching that goes on between companies, and things like that. That's why that retention piece, becomes really heavy. The other thing that would be my suggestion, just for everybody who's listening, is are you working together with the other manufacturing companies in the area and partnering with your Chamber of Commerce to be able to recruit more people into your area? Because the advantage that a place like Winona has that maybe didn't exist 3 years ago is as more and more people have the ability to work remotely, it means that you could recruit a family where you don't have to also, if the wife comes to work for your company, the husband may be able to work remotely from your community rather than have to do that. So I've talked to people in small communities who said, if we can work together and really work to recruiting people, that this is a great place to live, a great place to raise your family, it makes it easier to recruit people from the outside in when maybe that spouse doesn't have to quit their job and then look for a job in the smaller community. So that's something that all of you should be doing to work together. And I know you have a great Chamber of Commerce. I'm sure that they are already on top of that one. So we have some questions coming in from the audience. And so I want to start with Lisa's. And Lisa said that on the topic of engagement and retention, she'd like to hear the panelists sort of discuss what they're doing on a local level to incorporate diversity and inclusion efforts into the workplace. Because her research and every single thing that I read out there is that DEI is a huge priority for all employers today. Is that something that your companies are trying to focus on in the Winona area as well?
Ours actually comes at the corporate level, and our headquarters is in St. Louis. We have a women in engineering group, and we're actively working STEM, specifically focusing on women engineers. It's a really great place. We've gotten a bunch of great engineers and who've become great leaders in our organization. We've expanded our diversity policy to include extended diversity. We make it explicit. Gender identity is a big add to that. It is absolutely welcomed here, and we encourage you to work here because it's a place where you're going to feel comfortable.
Nice.
And we've worked actually together with Watlow on the STEM programs. I forget now exactly, Stan, what the name of that one was, because we haven't seen it here during COVID and stuff, but it was that summer program where we were bringing students down, and actually our two companies co-hosted those particular programs, but it was some minority STEM students and stuff that were participating and lower income and stuff like that, to give them the opportunity to, experience those kind of things. The truth is manufacturing is a challenge, right? I mean, it is typically a male dominated kind of industry and stuff. And so it's been difficult for us when we bring in, and not that we have many female candidates that come in and stuff, but I think a lot of times they take a look at, what we're doing. And again, ergonomically, we've adjusted everything we do. It used to be, okay, well, you'd have to, lift 75 or 100 pounds. Well, now it's, down well below so that everybody can, male or female can handle it easily and stuff. And we put the ergonomic tools in place to do that. But even after that, they take a look at it and they say, it's just not, right for them. So it has been a challenge for us. I think it's a little bit easier maybe on the professional side. And certainly we do, more there, but on the actual manufacturing floor, it is a challenge.
And Mike, you probably see lots of companies. So what's your 2 cents on this?
We don't have a specific program. However, it all goes back to the hiring of the right people on our teams. And what's fantastic is when we run into some of those more difficult situations, I love that my team is outspoken enough to bring that up to different businesses to say, hey, time out. I know you said this. That can't be right. We've got this person, and we have those conversations. And the number of times that they're right, it's fantastic. So again, I can't give any credit to a program. It's my team. It's the folks sitting on the other side of this wall that are all very much focused on how do we put all people to work. And it's fantastic. If you took a look at our demographics, you'd be pretty surprised. I know we are more diverse than the city of Winona, which is pretty awesome in my opinion.
Nice. So the next question comes in from an anonymous attendee who says, we have some in our organization that recognize the importance of this whole idea around cultivating relationships, but it really isn't something that is embraced by the management. How can mid-level and lower level management communicate the importance upward? So I'll let each of you kind of go first on that. And then I have a couple of thoughts on this too, because I think that the grassroots driven things are more accepted in companies today than probably ever before. So why don't we start with someone different? We'll go to Randy this time.
Yeah, Tom, I think, in my opinion, the best way for somebody, especially at a mid-level, to demonstrate to the leadership the importance of, whatever that they're trying to do is to actually demonstrate it, themselves. And that is take the opportunity, right, to build those connections, whether it's in the community or whatever. You shouldn't need the approval or the okay from leadership to be able to do that, right? That's something that you just do. But what you want to do is bring light to what those connections have actually done, either for them or for the company and stuff on there. And we see that, and when leadership sees those examples and hears about them, then they'll take it to heart, and you're moving to your to that next opportunity. So.
And Mike?
Go ahead.
Stan, go ahead.
I was just say, I agree with Randy. It's lead by example. Do it, give the ID credibility, and don't be preachy about it. It will be something that's attractive to upper management when they're seeing this and what is going on over there. I'm very interested in that. I want some of that. So it sells itself if you position it to be something that's attractive and accretive.
100%. Lead by example. Be the model for it.
Mhm.
And if that doesn't work, dude, give me a call. Our entire culture is built on ask for forgiveness, not
Mhm.
permission.
Mhm.
And there's you just sometimes need to find the right business that appreciates that right type of culture. There's some top-down culture. There's other cultures that are very flat, where that is looked highly upon and appreciated. You just have to find the right fit. Try
Yeah,
living it first, and then do what you got to do.
And my 2 cents on that is I was the marketing director for a law firm, and one of the practice groups really embraced all of this that I was trying to teach all the practice groups, and their lawyers started doing more together, and they started doing more with people in other practice groups. And all of a sudden it was very noticeable to everybody who was in different practice areas that it was more fun to be in the business transactions group, because they gave them a little bit more money for travel and entertainment of clients. They said, hey, if you want to go out to lunch with a lawyer in another department, the firm will pick that up, where the other departments didn't let them do that. And all of a sudden, other partners were coming to me saying, what are they doing? Why do all my litigators wish they were business transactions? And it was because over the course of a year, they just decided work could be more human-based, more fun. And if you can get a bunch of lawyers to want to be chit-chatty and fun and get to know each other on a personal level, I think you can do it in any industry. So I think my 2 cents to that question is, if you're a mid-level manager and you want your company to really embrace relationships, just have that picnic for your team and let your team have a great time. And other people will be like, why is our department not doing that? And it'll come along. And I think, I don't remember which one of the panelists said it, but don't be preachy. Don't be like, look at what we're doing. But I think that goes a long way. So our final question, and we're coming up to the end of our hour and a half together. Our final question is, with this whole move to hybrid workforces coming in now and very clearly being part of the future of all companies, sorry, I dismissed the question there accidentally before I finished reading it, but with hybrid coming in with all that, how do you encourage these types of connections with your team if some of that team is remote? And this is a super important question. So Mike, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I just have to say, when we all had to go remote, it was interesting. My team, I was nervous that we were never going to get everybody back in office. And by about 4 weeks in, my team had me convinced the other way of, hey, Mike, if we social distance, can we get back to the office? And they wanted to get back. So we've largely had that. Well, then my recruiting specialist decided that he and his girlfriend wanted to move to Colorado. And so it was a matter of, okay, Anthony is gone. How do we keep him going in the team? Well, each day in our AM meeting, we have a Zoom meeting. We still include him in on it. We shoot the bull a little bit extra on Mondays about what's going on over the weekends. We spend extra time making sure we have that one-on-one contact scheduled, even though it might be over the phone. Still get him involved with the team, and knowing when he's coming back into town, we're planning an entire team get together, nice, just to have him jump back into the team. So a combination of including in Zoom, intentionally adding, and then any of the spots where we're just having fun, make sure that we Zoom him in or FaceTime him in, which it actually, in some ways, it makes it even more fun having somebody on the phone that you're walking through the office with you.
Nice. Randy or Stan, remote work, keeping them involved?
Yeah, we're struggling with that right now. We've been hybrid since July, pretty much. We started to all come back, and then that kind of backed off, with Delta. We still have some people who aren't in, and we're looking at that. Right now, a lot of us actually are having to go out and support the factory floor just because of the ramp up. That it's, put your shovel in somewhere where you normally wouldn't. And if somebody's not here, they never get included in that, right? So we're saying hybrid, we understand that. Distance, we understand that. But, even to your speech at the beginning here, social connectivity happens at some level always on the personal basis. And as that goes away, even if they're in the Zoom call, it loses that direct personal touch. And it's harder to just say, hey, Joe, could you run out and look at that, because they're not here. So we're struggling with how to find a fine place, and balance, we think, is of hybrid is the right thing, not fully remote, unless I have a guy that works for me, lives in California. I get that one. But.
And Randy?
Yeah, I think, during COVID, right, Thom, all of us were forced into that particular mode of operation. And now coming out of that, A lot of people are saying, hey, by choice, I'd like to do that and stuff. And so I think what it screams to me is that people are looking for flexibility, right? And I think more now than ever, we need to make sure that we provide that flexibility and that understanding, and know that our lives are more than just work, and we need to make sure that we accommodate those things, that is life, and make that work on through there. The challenge, and Stan said it there, for manufacturing is, if you're working on a machine, you got to sort of be by the machine. But that said, right, we still need to find ways to provide that flexibility for our manufacturing environment, like we do for our professional environment. And so that is that challenge, for us.
Yeah, and it's something that's going to be on a case-by-case basis, I think, for a lot of companies. And as we wrap this up, I'll share one thing about this remote work. One company that I know that I've worked with did a really interesting thing that we came up with the idea, and it's something they're continuing even as people come back to the office. And that is, they were struggling with this. People are remote. How do we keep the connection? And so they programmed a whole series of things where the computer would, every week, you would get assigned someone else in the company. It could be any level, any department. It could be the CEO and the receptionist. It could be 2 researchers. It could be 2 people here. And during the course of the week, you had to have a 20-minute Zoom call with them. Everybody was working from home. You had to do a 20-minute call, and you had to check off that you did it. Now, the CEO said, look, if you're on a deadline and you've got something important, I don't want you taken away from customers and from the work we have to do. So you can put not able this week, or if you were on vacation. He goes, but if I look at any individual and you've got too many weeks where you're like, oh, I don't have 20 minutes. He goes, then you have a time management problem. We'll have a different discussion. So every week you would get assigned, Mike's going to talk to Randy. Stan's going to talk to Christy. Tom's going to talk to Mike. And they actually found, they were hiring a lot of people. They found it was a great way remotely to get people to have connections. And the one person I know well in the company was a young guy. He was a rock climber. And he's kind of an introvert. He got paired up with another introvert. No one was talking a lot in the first few minutes. And he said, you have any hobbies? And the guy goes, yeah, he had just moved to Chicago. He goes, I'm a rock climber, but none of the gyms are open. And he goes, my gym is open. And now they go rock climbing once a week together. They're back at the office and they go after work. But it came about because of those calls. So you can get that creative piece I talked about right in there and make that happen. It's been a lot of fun to be here with you all. Christy, thank you so much. I'm going to turn it back over to you. Thanks for having me. I hope I get to come to Winona in person for something someday.
You would love it. Thanks, Thom, immensely. Your message is really resonating with a lot of people, it seems, and it's really relevant right now. It's important. So thanks, Randy and Stan and Mike, also for sharing your expertise and the things that you do well in your organizations and for our community. One of the things that I just want to shout out, one of the things that really stood out to me, Thom, in your presentation was that people have not changed. That is so true. It is how we have allowed ourselves to adapt or change to our environment that has created the distractions that we allow in. So the people that do this well are the people that make sure that people matter. So thank you for all that we do and for all that you guys do. I think this is something that's really important. So as you're looking for new employees in your workforce, which we're all looking for, remember that keeping the ones we have is the most important key to the success of our organization and to bringing more in. So thank you again, Thom. Thanks, Randy, Stan, and Mike, and thanks for all that attended. Have a wonderful afternoon.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Christy.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.